The hum of the server room was George's lullaby. For 7 years, it had been his sanctuary, a cathedral of blinking lights and whirring fans where order reigned, and every single digital thread was accounted for. George wasn't the kind of guy who made the company Christmas card. He wasn't the one schmoozing clients or strategizing synergy over artisanal coffee. He was the guy who made sure the Wi-Fi didn't spontaneously combust, that the firewalls weren't just decorative, and that the company's digital footprint wasn't a gaping hole for hackers to waltz through. He was the unsung hero in khakis and a slightly too big polo shirt, the invisible backbone that held the gleaming, superficial edifice of Innovate Solutions together. Innovate Solutions. The name itself was a testament to their marketing department's prowess. They were disrupting industries, leveraging paradigms, and optimizing futures. At least, that's what James, their CEO, would tell you. James was a man who spoke in a silver tongue, his voice like polished chrome, capable of making a lukewarm quarterly report sound like a Declaration of Independence. He wore bespoke suits, a smile that never quite reached his eyes, and an aura of manufactured confidence that could charm the birds out of the trees and the fiscal responsibility out of the finance department. George had seen him in action during the all-hands meetings, a blur of platitudes and visionary pronouncements, always followed by a subtle shift of blame when things went south. George, however, dealt in facts, in binary, in the undeniable logic of system logs and transaction records. And lately, those facts had been painting a very ugly picture. It started small, a flicker of irregularity in the automated stock purchase alerts, a few unusual spikes in trading activity by certain executives that, while not immediately illegal, felt anachronistic. Too coincidental, too perfectly timed with whispers of upcoming product launches or market shifts that hadn't yet hit the public domain. He'd initially dismissed it as a glitch, a statistical anomaly that his own systems were probably overreacting to, but the anomalies persisted. They grew bolder. George, being George, did what any good systems administrator would do. He dug. He meticulously cross-referenced trading logs with internal communication timestamps, email metadata, and even the company's notoriously lax VPN access records. He built a separate, encrypted partition on his personal workstation, a digital bunker where he meticulously documented every single suspicious transaction, every executive involved, every date and time, and every corresponding internal communication that could even hint at foreknowledge. It was like finding a hidden blueprint within the company's own digital walls, a secret passage leading directly to a vault of illicit gains. He had enough. He had proof. Not just circumstantial evidence, but a clear, damning pattern that screamed insider trading louder than a server overload alarm. His first instinct, his only instinct, was to do the right thing, to report it, to present it to the one person who theoretically had the authority and the responsibility to act. James. George scheduled the meeting. He waited a week, letting the sheer weight of his findings settle, practicing his explanation in the sterile quiet of his cubicle. He dressed in his best shirt, a crisp, pale blue that made him feel almost official, and walked to James's opulent corner office. The door, a solid slab of mahogany that probably cost more than George's car, swung open at the touch of a button. James was at his desk, bathed in the golden glow of the afternoon sun, slanting through the panoramic windows. He was on the phone, mid-sentence, his voice a low rumble of confident reassurance. Absolutely, we're projecting robust Q4 growth, Mark. Innovate Solutions is poised to capture significant market share. The synergy is palpable. He gestured for George to sit, a dismissive flick of his wrist that spoke volumes. George sat, his hands clasped tightly, the encrypted drive containing his evidence, feeling like a lead weight in his pocket. James hung up, his smile widening as he turned to George. George, to what do I owe the pleasure? Don't tell me you finally figured out how to make the coffee machine brew something other than regret? He chuckled, a practiced, hollow sound. George ignored the jab. He'd learned long ago that engaging with the executive banter was a fool's errand. James, I need to discuss something urgent. It's about unusual trading activity. I found a pattern. James leaned back, steepling his fingers. Trading activity? George, that's not really your department, is it? We have a whole finance team for that. And a very expensive legal department to ensure we're all operating within the parameters. I understand, George said, his voice steady, though his heart was beginning to thud a frantic rhythm against his ribs. But this isn't a matter of parameters being pushed. This is a matter of clear violations. I've compiled documentation, evidence of executives trading on non-public information. James's smile faltered, just for a fraction of a second. A flicker of something George couldn't quite place, annoyance, concern, crossed his face before it was smoothed over by that practiced executive mask. Executives, you say? And what exactly is this evidence? George pulled the encrypted drive from his pocket. I've logged specific trades, matched them with internal communications, and I've been recording my conversations with you and Mark regarding the strategic realignment meetings. That's when the mask slipped. The silver tongue found a different, sharper tone. Recording conversations? George, are you aware that's highly irregular, if not illegal, depending on jurisdiction? I'm aware of the company's policy on recording conversations, George replied, meeting James's gaze. And I'm also aware of the SEC's stance on insider trading, which carries a slightly heavier penalty than violating an internal memo. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The weight of the data was its own amplification. James stood up abruptly, walking to the window and staring out at the city. The golden sunlight seemed to mock his polished facade. This is quite a serious accusation, George, and frankly, quite alarming. We'll need to investigate this thoroughly. He turned back, his expression now hard, cold. However, your actions, recording internal discussions, circumventing standard reporting channels, are unacceptable. Your position, in light of these developments, is no longer tenable. George's stomach clenched. This was the pivot. He'd prepared for it, but the cold reality of it still hit like a punch. Are you firing me, James? We are initiating a restructuring of the IT department, James said, the words a clinical pronouncement. Frankly, your role has become redundant. The systems are stable, the maintenance is outsourced for efficiency, and frankly, we don't have the business need for a full-time systems administrator with your particular skill set. He paused, as if searching for a more palatable word. We're offering you a severance package. Standard, of course, and we'll expect all company property returned immediately. Your badge, your laptop, your recordings? Redundant, stable, business need. The buzzwords cascaded over George like a tidal wave of corporate BS. He, who had spent countless nights and weekends ensuring that stable was more than just a marketing term, that redundant was a word that only applied to outdated software, not to the people who kept the whole damn machine running. He looked at James, at the cold, calculating glint in his eyes, and a profound, chilling understanding settled over him. They weren't just firing him, they were burying him, burying the truth along with him. I understand, George said, his voice unnaturally calm. He didn't argue, he didn't plead. He simply reached into his pocket and pulled out the encrypted drive. He held it for a moment, a small, unassuming piece of plastic holding the downfall of a corporate empire. You want this back? James extended his hand, his palm open, expectant. Yes, George, we do. George stood up, his movements deliberate. He walked to James's desk, not to hand over the drive, but to place it gently on the polished mahogany. This contains all my documentation, he stated, his voice clear and resonant in the quiet office. Every transaction, every communication, every recording. It details the insider trading, the executives involved, and your collaborative efforts in dismissing my concerns. James's hand froze mid-air, his eyes narrowed. What are you implying, George? I'm not implying anything, James, George said, a hint of steel entering his voice. I'm stating facts, and I'm also stating that I've made a backup. A beat of stunned silence. James's jaw tightened. A backup? That's highly improper. Is it? George asked, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. Because I happen to believe that when you're being fired for whistleblowing, having a backup is not just proper, it's essential. He looked James dead in the eye. You see, James, you asked me to return all company property, and I am. This drive, he tapped it with a fingertip, is company property. But the backup is mine. And it's already on its way to a much more interested party. He didn't wait for James's reaction. He didn't need to. He turned and walked out of the opulent office, leaving James standing there, his silver tongue now useless, his manufactured confidence crumbling like dry plaster. He walked past the reception desk, where the receptionist, a young woman named Chloe who always had a nervous habit of tapping her pen, looked up with wide eyes. George, everything okay? She whispered, sensing the shift in the office air, the sudden drop in temperature that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. George offered her a small, almost imperceptible nod. Everything is fine, Chloe, just fine. He walked out of the gleaming glass doors of Innovate Solutions and into the harsh, unfiltered sunlight. He didn't look back. He didn't feel the sting of being fired. Not yet. All he felt was the quiet, steady thrum of vindication, the satisfaction of a job meticulously done, and the knowledge that the carefully constructed facade of Innovate Solutions was about to come crashing down, one perfectly documented transaction at a time. The game wasn't over. It had just begun, and George, the quiet systems administrator, had just made the opening move. The sterile, recycled air of George's apartment did little to mask the stench of betrayal. He'd spent weeks in a self-imposed exile, a digital hermit in a world that valued the flash of innovation over the quiet hum of integrity. His severance package, a paltry sum designed to buy silence, sat untouched. Every cent felt tainted, a down payment on his own complicity. But George wasn't a man to wallow. He was a man of systems, of logic, and his systems were now running a new program, Operation Undoing. He'd meticulously cataloged everything. His personal workstation, a formidable beast of a machine he'd painstakingly assembled himself, had become his command center. The encrypted drive he'd left on James's desk was merely a decoy. The real vault was here, in his apartment, a fortress of encrypted files, terabytes of proof meticulously organized. Emails, he had them all, flagged and sorted by executive, by date, by suspicious keyword. Contracts, the ones pertaining to proprietary software licenses, the ones that dictated how Innovate Solutions leveraged external data, all scanned and cross-referenced. System logs, a dizzying array of timestamps, user IDs, IP addresses, and transaction confirmations that painted an undeniable picture of manipulation. He'd even managed to back up snippets of internal memos and financial reports, data that was supposed to be inaccessible outside the company's secure network. His mind, usually focused on network latency and firewall configurations, was now a battlefield of strategy. He knew direct confrontation was too risky. James would, and had, already mobilized his legal team, his PR spin doctors. They'd paint him as a disgruntled, unstable former employee, a narrative that was alarmingly easy to manufacture when the target was a quiet IT guy. No, George's counterplay had to be subtle, precise, and devastatingly effective. He was an architect of digital defense, and now he was building a digital siege. He started with the smallest, most seemingly innocuous details. He noticed that a significant portion of Innovate Solutions' revenue was tied to a specific third-party data aggregation service. This service had a strict clause in its terms of service. Any misrepresentation of data usage or unauthorized access would result in immediate termination of the contract, with substantial penalties. George, with his intimate knowledge of Innovate Solutions' network architecture, knew exactly how they were bending those terms. He had proof of them scraping data far beyond what they declared, using it to refine their trading algorithms with an unfair edge. A few days after his dismissal, a brief, politely worded email found its way into the inbox of the legal department at the data aggregation service. It was from a generic, untraceable email address, but the attached documentation was anything but. It contained screenshots of internal reports, anonymized transaction logs, and a clear explanation of how Innovate Solutions was in violation of Clause 7B of their contract. It didn't demand anything, it merely presented facts. Meanwhile, back at Innovate Solutions, the smooth facade was beginning to crack. George's absence, while initially a relief to James and his cronies, quickly became a disruption. He was the only one who truly understood the labyrinthine legacy systems that powered their core business operations. His departure had left a gaping hole in their IT infrastructure, a hole that nobody else was equipped to fill. The first tremor was subtle, a minor bug in the client management system that would have taken George 30 minutes to fix. Now, it was festering. Clients, accustomed to seamless interactions, began reporting delays, incomplete data, and frustrating system errors. Whispers started in the Slack channels, hushed complaints disguised as technical queries. Chloe, the receptionist who'd always seemed so stressed, sent George a quick, worried text. "George, are you okay? The whole CRM is acting up again. They're freaking out. James is in a mood." Then came the bigger wave. A critical software update, one that George had been meticulously planning for months, was due to be rolled out. Without his direct oversight, the update went south. Servers crashed. Data became temporarily inaccessible. The stock market reacted, predictably, with a minor dip, but enough to send ripples of panic through the executive suites. Another text from Chloe. "Oh my God, George. The servers are down. Like, all of them. People are actually crying. Is this your doing? Please tell me it's not your doing." George ignored it. He was a surgeon, not an arsonist. He was dismantling the machine, not burning it down. The cracks were widening. James, the silver-tongued CEO, was forced to issue a bland statement about unforeseen technical challenges during the all-hands meeting. George heard about it through the grapevine. A former colleague, Sarah from marketing, sent him a link to the internal memo, adding a shaky emoji. Sarah, a decent person trapped in a morally bankrupt environment, was growing increasingly uneasy. She confided in George via encrypted messages. "Things are getting really bad here. People are scared. That data breach last week wasn't a breach, it was a system failure. And that client complaint about the trading reports, they're all complaining. It's like everything is breaking. They're asking for you." James is furious, though. George knew the clock was ticking. The SEC investigation, initiated by his anonymous tip, was likely gathering steam, but it would take time. He needed to apply pressure from multiple angles to create a chorus of problems that would drown out James's PR efforts. He'd also noticed the company's heavy reliance on a particular proprietary algorithm for its high-frequency trading operations. This algorithm was the jewel in Innovate Solutions' crown, its competitive advantage. But George, in his deep dive, had discovered a critical vulnerability, a backdoor he himself had embedded years ago, a failsafe in case of corporate espionage or, as it turned out, internal malfeasance. It was a digital kill switch designed to render the algorithm useless without compromising its integrity, making it appear as if the algorithm was simply broken. He waited for the right moment. The company's stock had taken another hit, driven by the ongoing technical issues and persistent rumors of an SEC probe. James was visibly stressed, his carefully constructed facade fraying at the edges. During a tense emergency board meeting, one that was broadcast internally via a shaky video feed, George made his move. He didn't send an email this time. He didn't leave a note. He executed a series of precise commands through a secure, anonymized channel, targeting the core servers that housed the proprietary trading algorithm. He didn't delete it, didn't corrupt it. He simply activated his kill switch. The algorithm, the engine that drove Innovate Solutions' illicit profits, sputtered and died. On the live feed, James was mid-sentence, proclaiming the company's resilience, when the numbers on the stock ticker behind him, displayed on a massive screen, froze, then began to plummet at an unprecedented rate. A collective gasp echoed through the virtual boardroom. James stared, aghast, his face a mask of disbelief. "What is happening?" he stammered, his silver tongue rendered mute by pure panic. "The system, it's not responding." George watched from his apartment, a grim satisfaction spreading through him. He had orchestrated the first stage of the takedown. Innovate Solutions was no longer just experiencing technical difficulties, it was unraveling from the inside out. The panic was palpable, seeping through the company's digital walls and into the public consciousness. They knew they were in deep trouble, and they knew George was the ghost in their machine, the architect of their impending doom. But they still had no idea the full extent of his leverage, or the meticulous plan he had in place for the final act. The silence in George's apartment was no longer filled with the quiet hum of his workstation, but with the deafening roar of a collapsing empire. News of Innovate Solutions' catastrophic system failures, coupled with whispers of an SEC investigation, had sent their stock into a freefall. The headlines were brutal, dissecting the company's hubris and technological incompetence with gleeful abandon. George monitored it all with a detached intensity, like a surgeon observing a successful, albeit messy, operation. Then, the call came. It wasn't from James, but from Richard Sterling, the chief legal counsel of Innovate Solutions, a man whose reputation preceded him as a shark who specialized in devouring reputations. The caller ID displayed a block number, but George knew who it was without looking. He let it ring twice, then picked up, his voice steady and devoid of emotion. "George," Sterling began, his voice tight with an unnatural calm that barely concealed his desperation. "We need to talk. This situation, it's untenable." George leaned back in his chair, a slight smile playing on his lips. "Unraveling, wouldn't you say, Richard? A complete system failure." Sterling ignored the barb. "Look, we know you're behind this. The data aggregators, the algorithm shutdown, it's all too precise. We're prepared to negotiate." George chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Negotiate? You fired me for trying to do the right thing. You dismissed my evidence, tried to bury the truth. What makes you think I'm interested in negotiating with a sinking ship?" "Because, George," Sterling said, his voice dropping, losing some of its veneer of composure, "we're looking at massive regulatory fines, potential indictments, complete financial collapse. The SEC is breathing down our necks. This is your chance, your only chance to mitigate the damage, for everyone involved." George let the silence hang for a moment, the weight of Sterling's words palpable. He knew this was it, the endgame, the moment he'd meticulously planned for. "Mitigate damage," George repeated, a hint of steel entering his voice. Interesting choice of words, because from my perspective, the damage has already been done. To me, to the integrity of the systems I built. He paused, gathering his thoughts, the carefully constructed case solidifying in his mind. "Richard, I'm not looking for revenge. I'm looking for justice. And I've prepared 2 paths for Innovate Solutions. You can choose which one you'd like to tread." Sterling's breath hitched. "2 paths? What are you talking about?" "Path A," George stated, his voice clear and measured, "is the narrow escape hatch. You cooperate fully with the SEC. James resigns immediately, effective today, with no severance or golden parachute. All executives implicated in the insider trading scheme are terminated with cause and offer their full cooperation. The company faces significant fines, but we can structure a settlement that allows Innovate Solutions to survive, albeit in a greatly diminished capacity. You, Richard, would be instrumental in facilitating this cooperation. As a thank you for your assistance, I will consider waiving any further personal claims against you, provided you ensure all your clients are fully informed of the risks and participate in the resolution." He could hear Sterling furiously typing in the background. "And Path B?" Sterling's voice was a strained whisper. "Path B," George continued, his voice hardening, "is the nuclear option. You choose to stonewall. You continue to deny, to obfuscate, to obstruct. In that case, I will release every single piece of evidence I have to every major financial news outlet and regulator simultaneously. This includes detailed logs of the insider trading, proof of your team's deliberate attempts to cover it up, and the full extent of James's complicity. Innovate Solutions will be dead. Not just financially crippled, but utterly annihilated. Every executive involved will face criminal charges, and their careers will be over. The SEC will pursue every last dollar, and the public fallout will be catastrophic. Your law firm, Richard, will also face severe repercussions for aiding and abetting this fraud. George paused, letting the stark contrast sink in. You have 1 hour to decide. My email is on your screen, a full dossier detailing the evidence for both paths. Choose wisely. He hung up. The hour that followed was a blur of digital activity. George watched the stock ticker, saw it briefly tick up as rumors of a potential settlement circulated, then plummet again as the uncertainty lingered. He received a flurry of encrypted messages from Sarah, relaying the pandemonium within Innovate Solutions. James was reportedly having a meltdown in his office, screaming about betrayals and impossible odds. The legal team was in a state of utter chaos. At precisely 58 minutes into the hour, George received an email from Richard Sterling. The subject line read, "Confirmation, path is selected." Attached was a signed affidavit from James Altman, CEO of Innovate Solutions, formally resigning his position, acknowledging his full cooperation with the SEC investigation and admitting to his role in the insider trading scheme. Accompanying it was a formal termination letter for the implicated executives, all citing gross misconduct and violation of company policy. The resolution was swift and brutal. The SEC's investigation, already well underway thanks to George's initial evidence, accelerated with newfound cooperation. James Altman, stripped of his title and his credibility, was arrested within 48 hours. The polished facade of his career shattered. The executives implicated faced similar fates, their opulent lifestyles replaced by the stark reality of federal courtrooms. Innovate Solutions, crippled by fines and reputational damage, was forced into a painful restructuring. Shedding departments and laying off hundreds of employees, the very people George had inadvertently protected by exposing the rot at the top. George, the quiet systems administrator, didn't seek a payday. He didn't crave public adulation. His reward was the quiet satisfaction of seeing justice served, of knowing that his meticulous work had dismantled a corrupt enterprise. He received a confidential offer from the SEC to join their newly formed cybercrime division as a special consultant, leveraging his unique skills to combat corporate fraud on a larger scale. He accepted. His new life was a far cry from the sterile cubicle and the blinking server lights. He traveled, worked on cutting-edge cases, and found a sense of purpose he'd never imagined. He was no longer an unsung hero. He was a quiet force for good, a digital guardian, ensuring that no one else had to suffer the indignity of being fired for speaking truth to power. Watching the news reports of James Altman's arraignment, George felt a sense of closure. He'd played his hand perfectly, not out of malice, but out of a deep-seated belief in accountability. The corporate world was a complex ecosystem, and he'd just proved that even the slickest of CEOs could be brought down by a meticulous systems administrator with enough data and a well-timed click of a mouse. If watching corporate hubris meet its match, and a quiet whistleblower become an unstoppable force for justice, sparks something in you, consider hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel. We'll continue to bring you stories where the overlooked get their ultimate payday, not in cash, but in vindication. Because sometimes, the most powerful systems are the ones that are built with integrity, and the most satisfying retribution is the one that's documented, deconstructed, and delivered with irrefutable proof. It's not about getting even, it's about restoring balance. And George, the architect of corporate justice, had just proven that the system, when wielded correctly, always rights itself.